I would insure this for no less than $25,000.
It's because it's not worth £1,000, it's worth £5,000.
Oh my God.
What if a dusty treasure forgotten in your attic was worth $1 million? Welcome to our channel. Today we're counting down the most unbelievable attic discoveries ever appraised on Antiques Roadshow, including hidden heirlooms, historic artifacts, and rare collectibles worth incredible fortunes. Subscribe, ring the bell, and let's uncover them. If someone offered you $200 for an old baseball sitting in your house, there's a good chance you would take the deal without thinking twice. And that almost became the fate of this baseball. It wasn't displayed in a museum. It wasn't locked away in a safe. It wasn't treated like an important piece of sports history. For decades, it was simply an old keepsake that had been sitting quietly in the owner's home. What makes the story even more remarkable is that the owner wasn't a serious collector. He received the baseball when he was around 13 years old and kept it for decades without realizing what he actually had.
1919 World Championship baseball. They were given to me roughly about 38 years ago, I'd say. I must have been about 13 years old. A friend of my mom's gave them to me before he went back to Texas.
At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a signed baseball. But as soon as the expert began examining it, the story took a dramatic turn. This was a 1919 Cincinnati Reds World Series Championship baseball, connected to one of the most famous seasons in baseball history. And the most astonishing part wasn't its age, it was its rarity.
Championship team signed baseballs are very, very collectible. The earlier you go, the rarer they get.
Maybe 20.
How about less than 5? I would put an auction estimate of between $45,000 and $50,000.
Phew. That's a little more than I thought.
Yeah.
Fewer than 5 examples are known to exist. That single fact transformed the baseball from an old family possession into an exceptionally rare historical artifact. Its surface still carried the signatures of the championship team, including some of the most important figures from the 1919 Cincinnati Reds. Even more impressive, many of those signatures remained legible after more than a century. For a baseball from 1919, that is extraordinarily uncommon. Then the conversation ended with a moment that left everyone smiling.
This is by far the best baseball I've ever seen on the roadshow. So
Glad I brought some excitement to you, because you brought some excitement to me. My wife almost sold it for $200.
Well, I'm glad you didn't.
From a childhood gift to a valuation of $45,000 to $50,000. And all of it came within a single decision of being sold for just $200. That's what makes stories like this so compelling. Because sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in famous collections or major auctions. They're sitting quietly inside ordinary homes, waiting for someone to recognize their true value before it's too late. Some collectibles increase in value over time. And then there are pieces that appreciate so dramatically that the numbers almost seem impossible. This case began with 2 silver bracelets purchased by the owner's parents through the Heard Museum in the early 1970s. The original price? Less than $200 each. Decades later, they arrived at Antique Roadshow and immediately caught the appraiser's attention.
My parents collected jewelry from the Southwest, and these are 2 Charles Loloma pieces that I believe they got in the early 70s through the Heard Museum. And we actually have the receipts. So that it was under $200 per piece.
The moment the name Charles Loloma entered the conversation, everything changed. Loloma is widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of Native American jewelry. But these bracelets came from a much earlier period in his career, and that is exactly what made them so special.
These are by Charles Loloma. He is really the godfather of American Indian jewelry. His influence and his impact on jewelry altogether has just been unprecedented.
For many collectors, early works hold a unique appeal. They tend to be simpler, more authentic, and closer to the artist's original vision. That was one of the reasons the appraiser was so excited by this pair.
The thing that's really exciting about these 2, they're early. But I backpedal to this period, which I like the best. Very innately Hopi, and I just love that.
The owner estimated that the 2 bracelets might be worth around $15,000. That already sounded like an extraordinary return on the original purchase price, but the appraiser was only getting started. Both pieces were signed, retained their original receipts, and came with clear provenance from the Heard Museum.
I would say for the two pieces, about $15,000.
Okay. I would venture to say that in today's market, this bracelet alone, probably in the retail marketplace, about $25,000.
Whoa, can I sit down? Only kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
That was only the first bracelet.
This bracelet,
Wow.
maybe a little more. Like, why? Because people like turquoise. And it's just a really great example of his restraint and creativity. $28,000.
From under $200 each to $25,000 and $28,000. It was one of the most dramatic value increases in the entire video. But the most remarkable part wasn't just the money. The owner's parents had unknowingly chosen the right artist at the right moment and acquired the right pieces long before the market fully understood just how important Charles Loloma would become. This story begins with a family box. At first glance, there was nothing inside that immediately looked extraordinary. Instead, it contained a collection of small keepsakes that had been passed down through generations, all connected by a single name that most baseball fans today would probably never recognize.
My great-great-uncle, Leslie NUNAMAKER, played professional baseball from 1911 to about 1920 with teams like Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, St. Louis Browns, and Cleveland Indians.
And this is some of his...
Yes, it is.
What made the collection interesting wasn't one spectacular artifact standing on its own. It was the way the pieces worked together, preserving the life of a player who spent his career during one of the most important eras in early professional baseball. As the expert moved through the photographs, documents, and personal memorabilia, one item slowly emerged as the centerpiece of the entire collection: a championship medal.
And finally, we have a 1912 Boston Red Sox championship medal. And this was awarded to your great-great-uncle. And if we turn it around here, we'll see it's also been engraved with his name.
That was the moment the collection became something much larger than a group of family keepsakes. This wasn't simply an item connected to history. It was an item physically awarded to someone who had participated in that history. And when the expert began discussing how rarely these medals appear, the conversation took another dramatic turn.
I know of a couple in existence. I've never seen one outside of the Hall of Fame or outside of a historical society.
Really?
Now, the players got diamonds in their championship medals. This one, the diamond, has been removed. The good news is that that can be replaced.
Sure.
Okay? But this medal can never be replaced.
Wow.
That distinction perfectly captures the difference between material value and historical value. A missing diamond can be replaced. A century-old championship medal with a direct connection to a World Series team cannot. Its survival depends entirely on the fact that someone cared enough to preserve it for more than 100 years. Then came the moment that clearly meant the most to the owner.
No less than $25,000.
Yeah. That's wonderful. It's just great. What's that one worth?
That's probably worth, 20 grand.
$20,000. I got a tear in my eye.
The owner's reaction revealed that this was never just a story about money, because sometimes the most meaningful discovery isn't learning what a family heirloom is worth. It's realizing that a piece of your family's history has been quietly connected to the history of an entire sport all along. Among the thousands of stories featured on Antiques Roadshow, some are unforgettable because of the money. Others stand out because of their history. But the next story is remarkable for an entirely different reason. It begins with an old box of World War II memorabilia, and it ends with a reunion so extraordinary that it almost feels impossible to believe.
So I brought some of my dad's World War II memorabilia. He was a Dutch Jedburgh, a special ops soldier, and he jumped with General Gavin of the 82nd Airborne.
Right from the beginning, it was already a fascinating story. A special operations soldier, a wartime parachute mission, a connection to one of the most respected American generals of World War II. But then the owner shared another detail that made everyone listen even more closely.
My dad was walking point, and he spotted a machine gunist in a tree and shot him before the machine gunnist had a chance to shoot General Gavin. So General Gavin has always credited my dad with saving his life.
Up to that point, many people might have assumed it was simply a remarkable family story passed down through the generations. Then something happened that no one in the room could have expected. Right there at the Antiques Roadshow event.
I know the story that he saved my grandfather's life, because my grandfather was General Gavin.
The room fell almost completely silent. Two families who had never met before suddenly discovered they had been connected by a single moment on a World War II battlefield decades earlier. It was the kind of coincidence that would seem unbelievable if it appeared in a movie.
But the meat of the value of what you brought today is right here in those three wings.
Really?
While everyone was still absorbing that extraordinary reunion, the expert turned his attention to the three cloth wings lying on the table. At first glance, they looked surprisingly ordinary, but their provenance changed everything.
But because they're him, they're a little better than average. You have in the neighborhood of $10,000 worth of cloth insignia right there on that table.
No way.
About $10,000. Not because they were made from precious materials, but because they belonged to the soldier who saved General Gavin's life, and because they became part of one of the most extraordinary reunions ever witnessed on Antiques Roadshow. Sometimes the true value of a historical artifact isn't found in the object itself. It's found in the people, the memories, and the unexpected connections it brings back together many decades later. And at first glance, this ring could look like just another antique sapphire ring. But in the world of antique jewelry, sometimes the greatest value is hidden in the smallest details. A tiny carving, a small mark, a name hidden within the piece. And with this ring, everything started with a final gift left behind by a close friend.
It was left to me from a very dear friend who I'd known for many years, and he passed quite recently. I'd not seen him for nearly 2 years though, and I just got a letter out of the blue saying that I'd been left a load of his things.
At first, this ring did not enter the story as an expensive collector's item. It was a memory from a friend who had passed away, someone who loved art and objects with deeper stories behind them. But when the expert started looking closer, the ring slowly revealed a completely different level of value. The blue stone at the center was not just a sapphire, it was a sapphire intaglio. Instead of adding an image onto the surface, the intaglio technique requires an artist to carve directly into the stone, creating a miniature work of art inside an extremely hard material. And the figure carved into this sapphire was Julius Caesar, one of the most famous names from ancient Rome. But the detail that truly changed everything was not only the carving, it was the maker behind it. A small mark showing two letter C's facing away from each other connected the ring to Castellani, one of the most important jewelry ateliers in 19th century Rome. Castellani became famous for reviving inspiration from ancient Greece and Rome, creating pieces that were not only decorative but also carried history and artistic meaning. That gave this small ring several layers of value. It was a sapphire. It was an intaglio artwork. It carried the image of Julius Caesar. And most importantly, it carried the mark of a jeweler recognized by collectors. Something that first looked like a simple ring was actually holding a story that stretched across centuries.
Because it's not worth £1,000, it's worth £5,000.
Oh my God.
£5,000? But that number was only one part of what made this ring special. For collectors, the value came from Castellani, the intaglio technique, and the connection to ancient inspired art. But for the owner, it was still a final gift from an important friend. That is what makes antique jewelry different. One object can preserve hundreds of years of history while still holding a deeply personal human story. This ring did not capture attention because of its size. It captured attention because of what was hidden inside it. An ancient symbol, the mark of an important artist, and the memory of the person who chose to leave it behind. We've reached the upper half of today's countdown, and at this point the discoveries are becoming increasingly impressive. The next piece is one that seemed to captivate the expert almost from the moment he saw it. Not because of its size, Not because of any royal connection, but because of the extraordinary quality of the stone at its center.
What an opal that is. It's perfect.
And that's not the sort of praise experts hand out lightly. This remarkable opal came from Australia and was given to its owner as an 18th birthday present. Like many young people receiving a beautiful piece of jewelry, she simply saw it as a treasured gift from her family. What she didn't realize was that she was holding an exceptional gemstone that would leave even a seasoned specialist struggling to hide his excitement. The longer he examined it, the more impressed he became.
I'm too afraid to wear it because it's just so beautiful.
For opal collectors, everything comes down to color. The finest stones seem almost alive, constantly changing as they catch the light. Blue, green, yellow, orange, red. A shifting display of color that appears and disappears with every movement. It's a quality that very few gemstones can match, and according to the expert, this particular opal possessed nearly everything a collector could hope to find.
It's a very, very vibrant stone indeed. It's a very unusual shape.
The stone was mounted in an arts and crafts design dating to around 1915. More than a century old. Beautifully preserved. And still capable of stopping people in their tracks? Taken together, the age, condition, craftsmanship, and quality of the opal elevated this piece far beyond the category of an ordinary family gift. Then came the valuation.
Would you rather I said £4,000 today?
Very calm. Yes, that would be very good.
Good. All right. Well, there we are then. I'm telling you. I think it's a really, really beautiful opal.
From a valuation of around £700 in the past to approximately £4,000 today, an impressive rise for a pendant that has already survived more than 110 years. And when an expert says a gemstone actually talks to him, you know, some questions are enough to pull viewers closer to the screen the moment they are asked. What is in the box? And in this case, the answer is not jewelry, historical papers, or a rare piece of pottery. Inside the box is a plaster head, real human hair, real human eyelashes, and a fake hand so strange and unsettling that it is almost impossible to look away.
Inside the box, we found this wonderful plaster head with human hair, human eyelashes, and a strangely realistic human hand. What can you tell us about the contents of the box?
I don't know if anyone has heard of Willie Sutton. He was a famous bank robber, well-known bank robber. He was also well known for breaking out of prisons. This was his that he used in an attempted breakout.
Willie Sutton was not only famous for robbing banks, he was also famous for escaping from prison, and the head in this box was not some bizarre decoration. It was part of a failed prison break plan, a dummy head and a dummy hand, placed in a bed to fool the guards into thinking Sutton was still lying there. In this case, provenance is everything. Without the story of the owner's grandfather working at the prison, and without the box and its label, this might only be a creepy plaster head. But once it is connected to Willie Sutton, it becomes a real crime artifact. Hair from the prison barber shop, real eyelashes, a head made inside prison with a hand arranged as if it were gripping the edge of a bedsheet. The more the story unfolds, the creepier the object becomes, because it is not just a prop, it was once part of a real escape attempt.
And after conferring with my colleagues, we were able to give it a very conservative auction estimate of $2,500 to $3,500.
Wow, that's nice. That's very nice. That's surprising.
As far as I know, this is the first head in the box we've had on Roadshow.
$2,500 to $3,500 for the first head in a box on Roadshow. This may be one of the creepiest cases in the entire video, not simply because it is a fake head, but because it was a real fake head used in a real prison escape attempt by a real bank robber. Our next case is a perfect reminder that not every hidden treasure is made of gold, platinum, or diamonds. Sometimes one of the most surprising appraisals begins with a piece of costume jewelry. This necklace had been sitting in the family for years and was believed to have belonged to the owner's grandmother, or possibly even her great-grandmother. According to the family story, they were never wealthy people, so no one ever imagined that this necklace might carry any significant value.
I believe it was my grandma's, maybe my great-grandma's. They were very poor, so they had to work with what they could find.
That doesn't exactly sound like the beginning of a valuable treasure story. But only seconds after seeing the necklace, the expert seemed to know exactly what he was looking at.
It's called a bib necklace. It's a fabulous necklace. It was made in the 1950s-60s by a company that we used to call Juliana.
This turned out to be a striking example of a Juliana bib necklace, a name that has become highly sought after among costume jewelry collectors. What's especially interesting is that most Juliana pieces were never permanently marked. There were no logos, no hallmarks, and no reliable identifying marks attached to the jewelry itself. For years, collectors weren't even completely certain who had produced many of these pieces.
On the jewelry itself, it's not marked in any way, but they used paper tags, and so the paper tags were lost.
And that's exactly why discoveries like this can be so surprising. What appears to be an ordinary family necklace can actually carry decades of mystery and collector interest. But what truly made this piece stand out wasn't just its history, it was its size.
Oh. They have different sizes of this necklace. This is the gargantuan size.
Really?
In other words, this was the giant version, a spectacular explosion of color featuring layer upon layer of sparkling rhinestones. Green stones, pink aurora borealis stones, bright orange stones, every section seemed to catch the light differently.
And we also have green tourmaline rhinestones. We have pink aurora borealis rhinestones. We have orange rhinestones. You name it, we have it in this necklace.
It's not hard to understand why this necklace immediately became the center of attention during the appraisal, but the biggest surprise was still waiting.
These necklaces routinely sell for between $800 and $1,000.
Oh, go grandma.
From a family costume necklace to a value approaching $1,000. And judging by that reaction, the owner probably wasn't the only person in the room who was surprised by that reveal. After exploring relics from modern wars, we're about to travel much farther back in time. Not 1 century, not 2, but nearly 500 years. The next object wasn't discovered at an auction or purchased from an antique shop. It has remained in the same family for more than half a millennium.
This is your ancestral home.
My family lived here for 550 years till 1946. Some of the contents were removed by my grandfather when he gave Lyme away. And it passed to my father and then has come down to me now.
That story alone makes this artifact remarkable. It isn't simply an antique. It is a piece of family history, carefully preserved and passed down through generation after generation. But what truly caught the expert's attention was the dagger itself.
We've banded agate, and then we've got the use of carnelian. This is a dagger. But it's terribly elegant. It's actually so finely made that it couldn't really be used in anger.
Right.
Banded agate, carnelian, silver. Every detail suggests that this was never intended for the battlefield. It was created to display wealth, refinement, and social status rather than to serve as a practical weapon. Then the family shared a tradition that made the story even more intriguing.
Well, the family tradition is that it belonged to King Charles I.
Indeed, there is the name in Latin, Carolus, but I have to ask myself, is it Charles I?
If that tradition were true, this would be a royal artifact. But the expert refused to jump to conclusions. Instead, he carefully examined every clue, separating family legend from historical evidence. Even so, the results were remarkable.
We think this is a 16th century piece because its manufacturer is almost certainly Italy. It's a serious European work of art. The lapidary work is absolutely fabulous.
Although its connection to King Charles I could not be confirmed, the dagger's true origins were extraordinary. It was crafted in 16th century Italy. Not merely an antique weapon, but a genuine Renaissance work of art.
I think an auction estimate would have to be between 15 and 25,000 pounds.
Really? Yeah.
An auction estimate of 15 to 25,000 pounds reflected the significance of an artifact that has survived for nearly 5 centuries. Yet perhaps the most memorable part of this story wasn't the valuation. It was seeing a dagger that might appear to be a weapon at first glance, ultimately recognized as a rare and exceptional masterpiece of European Renaissance craftsmanship. We've officially reached the top 10, and the next case begins in a way that will feel very familiar to longtime Antiques Roadshow viewers. An old box, a forgotten piece of jewelry, and a family that knew almost nothing about where it came from. After their mother passed away, the family began sorting through years of stored keepsakes and personal belongings. Among the various small boxes was a piece of jewelry that nobody could remember ever seeing before. It had spent years sitting quietly out of sight. No one knew its history, and no one was even certain it was genuine.
When our mother died, because my sister here, we went through sort of various little boxes and things of nothing in particular, and we each had a choice, and this was my choice. And I mean, I don't even know if it's real. We never saw it. My mother never wore it.
At that point, it sounded like the beginning of countless other family heirloom stories. But within moments, the expert knew he was looking at something far more interesting.
Yes, well, it certainly is real, actually. It's a most fascinating jewel.
The piece wasn't actually made during the 18th century. Instead, it belonged to the 19th century revival of 18th century French jewelry, a period when designers looked back to the elegance and craftsmanship of an earlier age for inspiration. Blue enamel, diamonds, rubies, an intricate gold framework, and hidden on the reverse was a small locket compartment designed to hold a photograph or even a lock of hair from someone dearly loved. This wasn't simply jewelry created to be worn. It was jewelry created to preserve memories.
It's inspired by 18th century France. But we can say with absolute confidence this isn't an 18th century jewel. It's an 18th century revival one. And blue enamel, diamonds, a little ruby in the front, and turn it over and there's a locket at the back.
But the surprises didn't end there. Accompanying the locket was a remarkable bead brooch created by La Cloche Frères, one of France's most prestigious jewelry houses and a direct competitor to Cartier during the golden age of French luxury jewelry.
It's absolutely there. They're a very distinguished firm running in competition with Cartier.
Set with salon sapphires, diamonds, ruby eyes, and brought to life through an incredibly dynamic design, the brooch quickly became the star of the appraisal.
And everybody wants this thing, honestly they do, and value is to do with measured want. That's all that value is, and I'm going to tell you that in measured want that's £10,000.
God. The locket didn't reach quite that level, but even it delivered a valuation that left the family stunned.
Bigger, but quite enough at, say, £4,500–5,000.
Not bad at all for a piece that spent years forgotten inside a family box. And it's exactly the kind of discovery that has made Antiques Roadshow famous for uncovering hidden treasures in the most unexpected places. The deeper we move into today's countdown, the more the pieces begin to resemble museum treasures rather than ordinary jewelry. And the next discovery may be one of the best examples yet. At first glance, it's easy to understand why this piece remained treasured within the family for so many years. Its presence is impossible to ignore.
Well, I know that it was most probably acquired by my grandparents. My grandfather was a well-known goldsmith and silversmith in the early part of this century. I think that's older. He obviously simply acquired it, I imagine, because he fell in love with it.
And honestly, it's difficult to disagree. The piece immediately draws attention. Rich enamel work, green gold paradots, intricate decorative details, and a style that feels as though it belongs in a royal collection rather than a family jewelry box. This wasn't the kind of jewelry created to blend in. It was designed to stand out.
Well, I can quite see why you would. And, well, it's a stunning example of Victorian jewellery at its absolute best. And it's a type of jewellery that's often called Holbeinesque. There was a fashion throughout England in the 1860s to emulate the Elizabethan age.
The piece was created during a period when Victorian Britain became fascinated with Tudor and Renaissance history. Jewelry makers weren't simply producing fashionable accessories. They were attempting to recreate the grandeur and romance of earlier centuries through precious materials, vibrant colors, and extraordinary craftsmanship. The result was jewelry that felt historic even when it was brand new. And this piece captures that spirit perfectly.
And what a wonderful thing it is. It's in pristine condition. I think what's interesting to know about Howell and James is that it was a very famous firm. What date do you assume it was?
Well, I had been told it was about 1870, and again the term Holbeinesque was applied to it, but any more than that we knew nothing else. I don't know if it's even ever been worn. That may explain its pristine condition.
But beauty alone wasn't what impressed the expert. Condition played a major role as well. After roughly 150 years, the piece had survived in remarkably preserved condition, something collectors are always eager to find. The combination of age, craftsmanship, rarity, and preservation made it stand out immediately. And then came the valuation.
A specialist auction, one could expect to pay £8,000 for it, and if somebody was really greedy, perhaps $10,000 for such a dazzling example.
Gosh.
Throughout the appraisal, one word kept coming up: dazzling. And after hearing a valuation that could reach £10,000, it's difficult to think of a more fitting description. A spectacular survivor from the Victorian era, and another unforgettable discovery in today's countdown. From Juliana, we move to an even bigger name. A name associated with Paris, with European royalty, and even with Napoleon Bonaparte himself. At first, the story begins in a surprisingly ordinary way. A simple blue leather box arrives at the appraisal table. But as Antiques Roadshow has proven time and time again, sometimes the most important detail isn't the jewelry itself. It's the name inside the lid.
The name in the lid is Chaumet. Do you know, have you heard of this firm Chaumet before?
Yes.
What do you know about Chaumet?
They're a really old company, and I believe they still are going.
They are?
I think I've seen adverts in Vogue as well.
Well, they are a really important company, and believe it or not, do you know who their best first customer was? Napoleon Bonaparte.
With that single revelation, the significance of the piece changed immediately. Chaumet is far more than a luxury jewelry brand. It is one of the most prestigious jewelry houses in French history, famous for serving royalty, aristocrats, and some of Europe's most influential families for generations. For collectors, the Chaumet name alone commands attention.
They made an awful lot of jewelry for royal families. They made tiaras. So any jewelry that is made by a firm of this stature is going to have a significance about it.
What makes this discovery especially interesting is that the necklace isn't centuries old. It dates from the 1960s. That may sound relatively modern compared to some of the pieces we've already seen today, but jewelry from the 1950s and 1960s has become increasingly desirable in recent years. And when a respected name like Chaumet is attached to the piece, demand rises even further.
It's actually signed Chaumet. It was made in Paris, and it's been brought into this country, and the hallmark is London, 1966.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, jewelry made in the 50s and 60s is very in at the moment.
There was another factor working in its favor. The jewelry set was not actually complete. Part of it was still in the possession of the owner's aunt, which meant the overall value could potentially be even higher if the pieces were reunited. By this stage, the appraisal was no longer simply about a beautiful necklace. It was about a highly collectible piece from one of the great names in jewelry history.
Factoring in all that I've said, being Chaumet and so very in at the moment, £6,000 to £8,000.
Really? Gosh.
And furthermore, you know your aunt's got the earrings. As a set, £8,000 to £10,000.
Thank you so much.
A beautiful necklace, a legendary jewelry house, and a valuation that could reach £10,000 if the complete set were brought together. That's more than enough to secure Chaumet a place among the leading discoveries in today's countdown.
Now, the sight of a box like this often heralds the fact that it contains something by Fabergé. And when we open it up like this, we can see that it's certainly Russian, but not necessarily by Fabergé.
From the moment the box was opened, the expert realized this was not an ordinary diamond ring. In the world of antique jewelry, small details like a box, a signature, or the name of a maker can reveal a lot about the origin of a piece. At first, the ring brought to mind high-end Russian jewelry from the early 20th century. But the story behind it was what made the piece even more fascinating.
Well, I'm surprised you said Russian, actually, because I inherited it from my mother-in-law, and her father, I understand, bought it when the Romanian royal family had to sell all their jewels and they were no longer becoming royal and they were sent out to Romania. So I suppose I sort of thought that writing on the box was Romanian.
For many years, the family believed the ring had a special past, but they could not fully confirm the story. For jewelry connected to aristocratic families, provenance can be just as important as the materials or gemstones. The box suggested a connection to luxury Russian jewelry from the early 20th century, a period when Russian jewelers were known for pieces created for nobility and royalty. And when the expert examined it more closely, the clues on the box began to reveal more about its journey.
Well, it's certainly in Cyrillic, and actually I think what it does say is that it's retailed by a jeweller called Malkanar, and then underneath of Odessa. And I think we can be absolutely sure that this is contemporary with Fabergé, not only from the style of the box, but also from the style of the ring.
Although it was not made by Fabergé, the ring still belonged to the same era of luxurious Russian jewelry. The combination of elegant design, precious materials, and fine craftsmanship showed that this was a piece made for someone extremely wealthy. But for the owner, the most important question was whether the family story was actually true.
And I can't see much hope of buying a Russian ring like that really for much less than about £7,000, £8,000, £9,000.
Well, that's very reassuring.
Although the original owner could not be identified, the quality of the craftsmanship suggested it almost certainly belonged to someone of high status. From a family piece with a mysterious origin, the ring became a small connection to the history and world of European aristocratic jewelry.
Well, when we first found it among my mother's effects, my daughter was looking at it and she said, "That's Russian, I'm sure it says Fabergé." And I thought, I can't believe that, because I've no idea where it could have come from in our family.
At first, this seemed like another family piece that had been kept for years without a clear history. But in the world of antiques, small details can sometimes reveal more than the object itself. In this case, a tiny clue connected to the original case began to uncover a much bigger story.
And she was absolutely bang on, because in the lid satin it says K. Fabergé, St. Petersburg, Moscow and Odessa.
A few letters that could have easily been overlooked became the most important discovery of the appraisal. To most people, it was just a small marking inside an old box. But to the expert, it immediately suggested one of the most legendary names in jewelry history.
Because it jolly well is. I mean, it's really an extraordinarily wonderful find, really. See that funny little hallmark there? It stands quite simply for Carl Fabergé.
That was the moment everything changed. Fabergé is admired not only for precious materials, but also for exceptional craftsmanship, history, and its connection to the luxurious world of European collectors and royalty. For antique jewelry enthusiasts, the Fabergé name alone carries enormous importance.
And it gives a sequence of numbers which refer to stock books. I've actually had the time to look at the London stock books and check whether this jewel is in there.
What made this discovery even more special was that the brooch's history could be supported by original records. In the antique market, strong provenance can transform an object because it confirms the story and heritage behind the piece.
Today, I think it might be worth £8,000.
And a weak at the knees, good gracious.
The biggest surprise was that this secret had stayed with the family for years without anyone realizing its true significance. One tiny detail inside an old case helped reveal the real story behind the brooch. And the next item in today's countdown continues into the world of luxury jewelry, where a small collection brings together some of the most prestigious names in European craftsmanship. Some pieces of jewelry are valuable because they have been passed down through a family for generations, but this bracelet is far stranger than that. Hidden inside it may be fragments of material almost 2,000 years old. At first glance, it looks like an unusual antique bracelet. But when the expert studies the gold mounts and the small pieces of glass, the story immediately splits into two timelines. The bracelet itself belongs to the Georgian period, while the glass reaches much further back.
The gold mounts with the fittings and the composition, which is a very classical shape, would have been made in the Georgian period. It dates from the end of the 18th century or perhaps around about 1800. Prior to that, they hadn't been made since Roman times.
In other words, the bracelet was assembled at the end of the 18th century, but the glass inside it is not Victorian glass or 19th century Venetian glass. These are fragments of Roman glass. What had come down through the family as a small piece of jewelry was actually carrying traces of the ancient Roman world.
So what we're looking at is a collection of fragments of Roman glass mounted together at the end of the 18th century. It's just come down in the family as a little piece of jewelry.
Those pieces of glass may once have belonged to bowls, jugs, or vessels. After centuries underground, glass decomposes and develops a silvery iridescence. Collectors then polish the fragments again, allowing the colors inside to reappear. And when the expert says they may date from around the 1st century AD, the bracelet stops being ordinary jewelry.
They all date from round about the 1st century AD. So we're going back to almost 2 millenniums, I suppose, ago.
Inside it are techniques such as millefiori and latticino, glass-making methods the Romans once mastered and that were later forgotten for a very long time. So the value comes from both sides, rare Roman glass and the way those fragments were mounted into an elegant Georgian jewel.
Well, there's this one here, that's millefiori, individual canes. Next to it, even more remarkable, we've got latticino.
Then came the final number, and it was enough to make the owner almost afraid to wear it again.
Somewhere perhaps 6,000 to 10,000 pounds.
Heavens.
It's just lovely.
It's beautiful. I definitely won't wear it now.
A family bracelet had become a 6,000 pounds to 10,000 pounds piece of jewelry, holding fragments of glass nearly 2,000 years old. And this is the kind of case that makes people wonder, how many old jewelry boxes are hiding a history far older than anything their owners ever imagined? This next case begins with a ring that many people might judge only by looking at the diamonds. How large are the stones? Would it be worth more if they were removed and turned into something modern? But in antique jewelry, sometimes the greatest value is not found by changing a piece. It is found in everything the piece has managed to keep. Because this ring does not only carry diamonds, it carries a family story, a connection to the past, and a small piece of the Victorian era that survived for more than a century.
The ring belonged to my great-grandmother.
Who happens to be this lady here?
That's that lady there, yes.
In her court dress, perhaps, with fine lace and pearls, and that signals a pretty elevated status, doesn't it?
She was married to a guy called Clement Smith, and he was Queen Victoria's vicar.
Those few details immediately changed the story behind this ring. It was no longer just an old piece of jewelry. It belonged to a real person with a family history and a connection to the world of Queen Victoria through Clement Smith. But its value was not because it was a royal artifact. What fascinated the expert was how much of its original identity had survived. This is a Victorian 5-stone diamond ring, a 19th century style where multiple diamonds work together instead of relying on one large center stone. Over time, many antique rings have been altered. The stones are removed, recut, or placed into modern settings because people believe that will make them more valuable. But once that happens, something impossible to replace disappears: the original history. This ring was special because it still kept the setting, craftsmanship, and feeling of the period when it was created. Collectors are not only looking for diamonds. They are looking for pieces that still carry their original story. That is why the expert did not see this as a ring that should be taken apart. He saw it as a piece of the 19th century that had survived almost exactly as it was meant to be.
And this would be a complete travesty because this is a mid-19th century ring, looking absolutely wonderful as it is. And I don't think anybody would dream much of doing that. So very pretty, original condition, enviable, marketable. So £3,000 to £5,000.
3,000 to 5,000 pounds. But the real lesson was not only about the price. The value came from the fact that the ring remained unchanged after more than 150 years. If someone removed the diamonds, the stones would still exist. But the story around them would disappear. And that is what makes this Victorian 5-stone diamond ring special. Sometimes in antiques, the most valuable thing is not making something look newer. It is protecting the history that is already there. After several six-figure treasures, this case tells a different kind of story. No revolution. No famous celebrity. Just a small collection that once belonged to the owner's aunt, who married a wealthy Egyptian businessman in the 1940s. For many years, these pieces sat quietly in a safety deposit box.
Now, I'm assuming, therefore, that these would have been worn by someone who was in your family?
They were my aunt's, and she married a wealthy Egyptian in the 40s, and these were part of her treasure trove, I guess, from that period. These have been kept in a safety deposit box for many years, and just interested to find out a little bit of the history.
The collection consists of only 3 pieces: a powder compact, a cocktail watch, and a double-clip brooch. It doesn't sound like much, but each item carries a prestigious name behind it. The first piece appears elegant, decorated with small gold details and rubies. Then the appraiser opened it and spotted the name inside: Boucheron, Paris.
There we are. If I rub away at the edge, I can see a word there.
Yeah. Right.
And that word is Boucheron, Paris.
Wow.
Now, Boucheron is one of the great makers.
The watch proved to be equally impressive. It was a diamond-set cocktail watch, a style that became enormously popular during the years between the world wars. And under closer inspection, the appraiser found the signature of one of the most respected watchmakers in the world.
This watch, when you look at it with a lens, it's signed Vacheron and Constantin, one of the great makers.
The final piece was an Art Deco double-clip brooch. This was exactly the kind of jewelry fashionable women loved to wear at the time. Looking at all 3 pieces together, the appraiser could almost picture their original owner.
So she'd go to this ball or function wearing her Vacheron diamond watch, her Boucheron powder compact, and her diamond double clips. She was some girl.
Then came the valuations.
This box is probably worth £1,000 to £1,500.
Wow.
Very good. Something like that. The watch, because it's by such a fine manufacturer, £3,000 to £4,000.
Wow.
I can tell you, having looked at them with my lens, they are beautiful. £8,000 to £10,000. Wow.
Wow.
So combined value, £12,000 to £15,000. Fantastic.
Amazing.
The collection carried a combined value of £12,000 to £15,000. Not the most expensive group of jewelry in the video, but it felt like a miniature time machine. With just 3 accessories, an entire era of elegant parties, cocktail watches, and Art Deco glamour seemed to come back to life.
My mother was friends with a 49er miner who lived down the street, and they used to garden together. And I remember this man. He was very tall, he had a long gray beard. He wore a red plaid shirt or red shirt always, with suspenders.
This piece of jewelry did not begin its story in a jewelry store, but through a very personal connection with a real gold miner. The owner did not just preserve the object itself, but also the memory of the person who gave it to the family. And what made it even more special was that the pieces of gold inside could be directly connected to one of the most famous periods in American history.
Part of what makes it very special is your connection to somebody who actually mined this out of the ground in the California gold rushes. There's a lot of gold miners that went for the California gold rushes. Hundreds of thousands of people came to look for gold, came to find their fortune, and very few of them did.
The California gold rush attracted hundreds of thousands of people searching for fortune, but very few actually found gold. Most of the gold discovered appeared as tiny flakes or gold dust, while larger natural gold nuggets were much rarer. And this piece became especially interesting because it preserved both forms of gold.
Most of the gold that came from the California finds came up as these little bits of, these little flakes, tiny little flakes, which look almost like dust. Right. And then fewer of them, far fewer of them came up out of the ground as whole pieces, as whole nuggets. Actually, this is pretty interesting because he's got both kinds here.
Unlike fine jewelry created to look flawless, this piece still carried the raw character of gold as it appeared in nature. The natural gold pieces, local craftsmanship, and the story behind it made it feel more like a direct keepsake from the gold rush era than a typical commercial item.
It's the California Gold Rush jewelry. It's a big part of our history. It is. And I would give this an auction estimate of $1,500 to $2,500.
Oh, you're kidding. I just don't believe that.
Its value was not only in the gold itself, but also in its provenance, the real connection to the person who mined those pieces of gold from the earth more than a century ago. Opal is one of the most beautiful gemstones in the jewelry world. It's also one of the most fragile. Over time, opals can dry out, crack, and lose much of their value. So when a nearly 100-year-old opal jewelry set appeared on Antique Roadshow, the first question wasn't how much it was worth. It was whether it had survived the decades intact.
You know, a lot of people consider these sort of things aren't very lucky. Why do people not think that they're very lucky? Well, because they've got this habit of drying out and cracking. They fall apart. If they've got cracks in them, unfortunately, it brings the value right down.
Right.
These, though, I'm pleased to say, are in extremely good condition.
And that was the first piece of good news. The opals in this collection had remained in remarkably fine condition. There were none of the tiny fractures that often appear in stones of this age. Flashes of green, red, and blue still shimmered beneath the surface. The owner received the set from her grandmother when she was around 15 years old. In fact, the jewelry was special enough that it convinced her to get her ears pierced so she could wear the matching earrings.
No, they were given to me by my grandmother when I was about 15, and she said, oh, I could have these if I had my ears pierced. I didn't have ears pierced at the time. So ever since then, I've worn pierced earrings.
According to the appraiser, the necklace dates to around 1,925. But the piece that caught his attention most was the pendant. Its opal was completely different from the others. It displayed far more fire, more color, and immediately stood out from the rest of the set.
You've also got an opal pendant, and I'm interested in this one because, as you can see, it's an utterly different stone.
Much more fire in that one.
Much more fire, much more of this so-called pin fire, where you've got all sorts of flecks.
Then came the valuation, and the numbers immediately caught everyone's attention.
So down to values, well, I would think for insurance around about £7,500. You've got the opal beads for the ears too.
Right.
These, for insurance purposes, probably about £500, £600, and that pendant probably at auction around £800 to £1,000, and insure that one for £2,500.
The necklace alone carried an insurance value of around £7,500. The earrings and pendant added even more value. But the most memorable part of this case wasn't the money. It was the fact that a gemstone, famous for its fragility, had survived nearly a century while still preserving its beauty. After several six-figure treasures, this case tells a different kind of story. No revolution. No famous celebrity. Just a small collection that once belonged to the owner's aunt, who married a wealthy Egyptian businessman in the 1940s. For many years, these pieces sat quietly in a safety deposit box.
Now, I'm assuming, therefore, that these would have been worn by someone who was in your family?
They were my aunt's, and she married a wealthy Egyptian in the 40s, and these were part of her treasure trove, I guess, from that period. These have been kept in a safety deposit box for many years, and just interested to find out a little bit of the history.
The collection consists of only 3 pieces: a powder compact, a cocktail watch, and a double-clip brooch. It doesn't sound like much, but each item carries a prestigious name behind it. The first piece appears elegant, decorated with small gold details and rubies. Then the appraiser opened it and spotted the name inside: Boucheron, Paris.
There we are. If I rub away at the edge, I can see a word there.
Yeah.
And that word is Boucheron, Paris.
Wow.
Now, Boucheron is one of the great makers.
The watch proved to be equally impressive. It was a diamond-set cocktail watch, a style that became enormously popular during the years between the world wars. And under closer inspection, the appraiser found the signature of one of the most respected watchmakers in the world.
This watch, when you look at it with a lens, it's signed Vacheron and Constantin, one of the great makers.
The final piece was an Art Deco double-clip brooch. This was exactly the kind of jewelry fashionable women loved to wear at the time. Looking at all three pieces together, the appraiser could almost picture their original owner.
So she'd go to this ball or function wearing her Vacheron diamond watch, her Boucheron powder compact, and her diamond double clips. She was some girl.
Then came the valuations.
This box is probably worth £1,000 to £1,500.
Wow. Very good.
Something like that. The watch. Because it's by such a fine manufacturer, £3,000 to £4,000.
Wow.
I can tell you, having looked at them with my lens, they are beautiful. £8,000 to £10,000.
Wow.
Wow.
So combined value, £12,000 to £15,000.
Fantastic.
The collection carried a combined value of £12,000 to £15,000. Not the most expensive group of jewelry in the video, but it felt like a miniature time machine. With just 3 accessories, an entire era of elegant parties, cocktail watches, and Art Deco glamour seemed to come back to life.
In 2001, my mom died, and I found this box in her safety deposit box. She was very frugal. She grew up poor, and then even though she wasn't so poor, she would go shopping in the Bronx, and my father would shop at Fifth Avenue. They traveled a lot through Europe, a lot to England. I would think he probably bought that box. I can't imagine her buying a box like that.
But what made this small box truly interesting was not just the mystery of who originally bought it. It was the story of the person who created it. When the expert began examining the piece, what first appeared to be a beautiful silver box slowly revealed a much bigger identity. It was the work of Gerald Benny, one of the most influential British silversmiths of the 20th century. After World War II, British silver design entered a period of transformation. A new generation of makers began moving away from simply repeating traditional styles from the past. They wanted to create pieces that reflected a more modern era. And Gerald Benny became one of the leading figures of that movement. What made his work instantly recognizable was not only the shape of his pieces, it was the surface. This box was crafted from sterling silver, combined with details made from 1/8 karat gold, but the feature that truly defined it was the unique finish on the outside. A technique that later became Benny's signature style, the bark finish. The deep textured lines across the silver created a natural effect similar to the surface of tree bark, allowing light to interact with the metal in a completely different way from traditional polished silver. And the most fascinating part was how this famous technique began. It came from an unexpected moment during the making process. Something that could have been considered a mistake eventually became the detail that defined his entire style. That is why the value of this box was never just about the silver or gold used to create it. Collectors see a design language, a unique technique, and the mark of an artist who played an important role in the history of modern British silver. Although the box itself is small, it contains many of the elements collectors search for: an important maker, a recognizable style, and clear proof of origin. The hallmarks, signature, and material marks underneath helped confirm the true story behind this small piece.
An identical box to this one recently sold in June 2014 at auction in London for £3,750, which would be around $6,000 at auction.
Right. Wow.
I would estimate it at auction for anywhere between $5,000 to $7,000 to reflect that result.
My mother would be turning in her grave with this.
And what makes the story even more surprising is that something kept quietly for years carried the signature of one of the most important silver designers of the 20th century.
My mother gave it to me. It had been given to her for her 70th birthday, that was about 1990, by a very good old friend of hers who loved it. And she gifted it to my mother, and my mother gifted it to me, and I'm proud and thrilled to have it in my household.
I think you should be. You know, it's older than us.
It's older than your mother, and it'll be here a lot longer than we are.
But what made this piece even more special was not just the journey it had taken through different generations. It was the craftsmanship hidden behind the silver surface. At first glance, it could simply look like an elegant silver pitcher displayed inside a home. But when the expert examined it more closely, the true identity of the object began to appear. This was an American sterling silver beer pitcher made by Gorham Company, one of the most important names in the history of American silver. And the reason this piece stood out was not only because of the Gorham name, it was because of how a simple everyday object had been transformed into a work of art. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, high-quality silver pieces were not created only for practical use. They were also a way for skilled craftsmen to display their creativity, technique, and attention to detail. On this pitcher, every part of the decoration was connected to its original purpose. The design featured hops, the plant directly associated with making beer. But these details were not simply placed on the surface as decoration. The craftsmen incorporated them into the entire shape of the pitcher, from the body to the handle and the smaller surrounding details. To create this effect, artisans used complex hand techniques like hammering and chasing, giving the metal surface depth, texture, and a sense of movement. And this is what separated the piece from ordinary silverware. Its value was never only about how much silver it contained. Collectors look for the skill, the design, and the story of the people who created it. A normal pitcher could be used for a short period of time and eventually replaced. But a piece made with this level of craftsmanship could survive long after the world around it changed.
There's nothing low rent about this. I'm going to give you an insurance valuation because I suspect, based on everything you've said, you're going to keep it in the family. I would put a value on it of $7,500.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. How nice. Wow.
Just an exquisite piece of American silver.
After years of being seen as a familiar object in the family, this silver pitcher was finally understood in a completely different way. It was not just a decorative item or something passed from one generation to another. It represented a period when craftsmen could take even an everyday object and turn it into a piece of art. And that is why a beer pitcher created more than a century ago continues to survive today as a small piece of American silver history. The next case begins with a ring that would be very easy to overlook. There is no large diamond at the center. No bright gemstone that immediately captures everyone's attention. And based on size alone, many people might assume this is just a small antique family ring. But sometimes, the smallest objects are hiding the biggest stories. Because the value of a ring does not always come from an expensive stone. Sometimes it comes from history, meaning, and a background that is almost impossible to recreate.
Well, you know the expression rare as hen's teeth, don't you?
Yes.
You have brought me the mother of all hen's teeth here.
Really?
This is an extremely rare expression of jewellery.
When the expert used a comparison like that, he was not simply talking about a beautiful object. He was talking about something incredibly difficult to find. At first glance, this might look like a small gold ring with a garnet, but the real secret was hidden in the details most people would never notice. There are 10 small beads around the ring, and they were not created just for decoration. This is a decade ring, a miniature form of a rosary, where each bead represents a prayer and a religious tradition. It is both a piece of jewelry and an object connected to personal faith. The ring is made from 22-karat gold and features a cabochon garnet, but the materials alone are not what make it so special. The detail that changes everything is the provenance. The ring has a connection to Pugin-Hardman, a name linked to the Gothic Revival movement and the history of British design. Augustus Welby Pugin was an important figure in Gothic Revival, where design was not limited to grand architecture but extended into even the smallest objects. After Pugin's time, the Hardman family continued this tradition through metalwork, stained glass, and religious pieces. So this ring is not simply viewed as gold with a gemstone. It is a combination of craftsmanship, faith, and a very specific design history. An antique garnet ring can be found, but a decade ring with the Pugin-Hardman background, story, and rarity is something completely different. That is why the expert was not only valuing the materials, he was valuing a piece of history captured inside a small ring.
So, without a shadow of doubt, it's worth £8,000.
Oh
without
my God.
it? Oh, that dear little ring.
8,000 pounds for one small ring. A number that the owner could hardly believe. But after understanding the story behind it, the size was no longer the most important thing. Because this ring does not impress through sparkle. It impresses through depth. Through 10 tiny prayer beads, 22-karat gold, Pugin-Hardman provenance, and a connection to an important period of British design. For collectors, that is something almost impossible to replace. An object that is not only worn on a finger, but also preserves traces of faith, family, and history. And sometimes in the world of antiques, the most special treasures are the small things that many people would easily overlook.
It's been in my family for over 40 years. I don't know anything about the piece itself, and my mother was wearing this in the portrait. And ever since then, it's been disappeared into the safe deposit box, and I inherited it.
For more than 40 years, this small object remained a mystery within the family. It once appeared in a portrait of the owner's mother as a piece of jewelry worn around the neck, but afterwards it was placed inside a safe deposit box with very little known about its true origin. At first, the family only had guesses about where it was made, but the expert quickly noticed the first unusual detail. This object was never meant to be used in the way they had imagined.
In the portrait, where was she wearing it?
Around her neck.
She was wearing it
Yes,
around her neck.
yes.
How interesting. Because that's not where it should be.
Really?
It is a scent bottle.
Instead of a regular pendant, it was actually a scent bottle, a miniature container for fragrance that was once used as a fashion accessory. During the 19th century, personal items like this were not only practical objects, but also reflected the status and taste of the owner. And with a closer inspection, the expert discovered the craftsmanship hidden inside this tiny piece.
This was probably made around 1880, and it is French. Actually, it's not. The colorful part here is enamel on metal, made with 18-karat or higher yellow gold.
The scent bottle was identified as a French piece, dating from around 1,880 foot. The colorful decoration was not porcelain, but enamel on metal, a technique that creates a bright, durable surface with a sense of depth. Combined with high-quality gold and carefully finished metalwork, the piece revealed the detail and refinement of luxury accessories from that period.
The chain is gold, the mounts are gold, so the metalwork is really exquisitely chased, finished. It has a different color gold around the outside.
The value of this object came not only from its precious materials, but also from its design and craftsmanship. A small perfume bottle like this represented a time when even everyday items could be transformed into portable works of art.
Never had it appraised.
At auction today, that would probably bring around $7,000 to $9,000.
Wow, that's great.
From a family piece once mistaken for ordinary jewelry, this scent bottle turned out to be a French gold and enamel creation over a century old. A small keepsake ultimately revealed a story of fashion, craftsmanship, and the elegance of a past era. We're getting very close to the top 5, and at this position sits a name that hardly needs an introduction. Tiffany & Co., one of the most famous jewelry houses in the world. But what makes this story so interesting is that for many years the owner was told something completely different about her necklace. She was told it was worth little more than its gold scrap value.
I had it appraised about 20 years ago, and they told me it was only worth the scrap weight of gold.
If that appraisal had been correct, this piece would never have made it into today's countdown. The necklace was originally given as a wedding gift in 1872 and had remained in the same family for more than 150 years. That alone makes it an impressive survivor. But what truly caught the expert's attention wasn't just the necklace itself. It was the small box sitting beside it. A box that turned out to be a crucial part of this story.
And the box is also an important part of the story. And if we open up the box here, what we will see is that the inside of the box, it says Tiffany & Company, Union Square.
In the world of antiques, provenance can change everything. And this necklace is a perfect example. Without the box, it would simply be an attractive 19th century gold necklace. With the original Tiffany & Company Union Square box, it gains a documented connection to one of the most celebrated jewelry firms in history. Suddenly, it becomes much more than gold. It becomes Tiffany.
you always will need to keep it with the box, because if the box and the piece become separated, then nobody's going to know that the piece is actually Tiffany.
Right.
That's why the expert emphasized that the box was almost as important as the necklace itself. Together, they tell a story that neither could tell alone. And after years of wondering about its true worth, the owner was finally about to get an answer.
At auction, one would expect to gain anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000. For insurance purposes, it should probably be insured for about $9,000.
Oh, that much. Thank you.
Yes, far more than the scrap gold valuation she had heard years earlier. A Tiffany necklace, more than 150 years old. Its original box still intact, and an insurance value of around $9,000. More than enough to earn this remarkable family heirloom a place in today's top 6.